The conference room on the third floor of the Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings building in downtown Nashville had a view of the river, and Brandon Kincaid liked to stand with his back to it when he delivered bad news. He was standing that way on a Thursday morning in April. Across from him, a 74-year-old man in a clean but faded denim jacket sat with his hands folded on the glass table. His name was Raymond Ellis Wheatley. He had driven 52 miles from Maury County that morning in a 1994 Ford F-150 with 312,000 miles on it. Kincaid slid a folder across the table. "Mr. Wheatley," he said, smiling with perfect teeth, "I'm afraid I have to inform you that the 167 acres you have been squatting on for the last 45 years legally belong to my firm. We'll be taking possession on June 1st. He let the word squatting sit in the room. Raymond did not move. He read the top page. He turned it. He read the second page. Then he said quietly, "I don't believe you'll be doing that, son." Kincaid laughed. "Sir, I have a Vanderbilt MBA. I have a legal team on retainer. You have a tractor." 3 days later, Brandon Kincaid would be sitting in a wood-paneled courtroom in Columbia, Tennessee, unable to lift his eyes from the table. Because Raymond Wheatley had been carrying something in a green steel box since October of 1979. And his father had been carrying it before that. Raymond Ellis Wheatley was 74 years old, and he had lived on the same 167 acres of Maury County, Tennessee, his entire life. He had inherited the farm from his father, Clyde Wheatley, in the spring of 2003, a week after burying him beneath the largest oak on the ridge. His hands looked like the bark of that oak. He wore the same pair of red wing boots for 11 years before replacing them, and only because the sole had split clean through at the heel. His truck had sputtered at the same mile on cold mornings since 2011, and he never bothered to fix it because he knew exactly when it would happen, and he had learned to time the hill. He had never owned a credit card. He paid in cash or by check. In the town of Mount Pleasant, population 4,600, Raymond was known for 3 things. He never missed a funeral. He paid every debt by the 5th of the month. And for 45 consecutive years, he had walked into the Maury County Property Assessor's office every February and paid his property taxes in person, in cash, in the exact amount printed on the slip. The clerks knew him by name. The new clerks learned him by February. He did not talk much. When he did, people listened because Raymond Wheatley never said anything he had not already thought about for a long time. There was a routine he followed that no one in the town knew the meaning of. Every Sunday after church, Raymond drove home, walked into his father's old tool shed, and unlocked a heavy green steel box that sat on the second shelf behind a row of mason jars. He would lift the lid. He would look inside. He would close it again. He had been doing this for 22 years. Before him, his father had done it every Sunday for 24. The box had not been opened for any other reason since October of 1979. Raymond had never told his wife Eliza what was in it. He had not told his son Daniel. He had not told the lawyer he had used for 30 years. He had been instructed not to. "Son," his father had said on a September afternoon in 1982 as they stood on the porch watching a storm move over the south field, "there will come a day, maybe not in my life, maybe not in yours, but there will come a day when a man in a good suit will walk onto this land and tell you it isn't yours." Clyde had taken a long breath. "When that day comes, you walk him to the shed, you open the box, and you let the paper do the talking." Raymond had been 31 years old. He had nodded once. He had waited 43 years. Brandon Kincaid was 34 years old and had grown up in Brentwood, Tennessee, which meant he had never once had to worry about a well running dry or a spring calf dying before dawn. He had gone to Vanderbilt for undergrad and Vanderbilt for the MBA, and at the age of 29 he had been made junior partner at Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings, a Nashville investment firm that specialized in acquiring distressed agricultural debt from failed regional banks and, in Kincaid's own words at a closing dinner, rationalizing the underlying real estate. Rationalizing meant evicting. His haircut cost $180. His shoes cost more than Raymond Wheatley's truck was worth on a good day. In March of 2025, Ridgeline bought a portfolio of old loan paper from the estate of the long-collapsed Farmers and Merchants Bank of Columbia, Tennessee. The portfolio included 71 foreclosed properties across 4 counties. Most had long since been resold and redeveloped. One parcel, however, had never moved. 167 acres in Maury County. According to the paperwork in the Ridgeline files, the land had been foreclosed on in October of 1979, purchased at the courthouse auction by the bank itself for the sum of $38,200, and held in the bank's real estate portfolio ever since. 46 years. Brandon Kincaid looked at the satellite photos: fenced pasture, a barn, a small white farmhouse, cattle. Someone was clearly using the land. He was delighted. "We've got a squatter," he told his associate. "This is going to be easy." On a Tuesday morning in April, Kincaid drove out to Maury County in a leased black Audi. He turned down a gravel road. He found an old man in a denim jacket walking a fence line. Kincaid rolled down his window. "Are you Raymond Wheatley?" "I am." "My name is Brandon Kincaid. I represent Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings. We are the lawful owners of this property. You have 60 days to remove yourself and your belongings, or we'll be pursuing legal action for trespass and unjust enrichment." Raymond said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Son, you'd better come up to the house. I believe you've made a mistake." "I don't make mistakes, sir." Raymond looked at him the way a man looks at a weather report he has already lived through. "Come up anyway, I'll make coffee." Kincaid declined the coffee. He handed Raymond a folder containing a notice of claim and a court filing date, and he did it there on the gravel drive in the sun where Raymond's neighbor across the road could see. He wanted the neighbor to see. Then he got back in the Audi and drove away. Raymond watched the dust settle for a long time. Then he walked to the shed. Raymond Wheatley did not call his son that night. He did not call his lawyer. He did not call anyone. He walked from the shed to the back porch carrying the green steel box under his arm for the first time in 45 years. He set it on the kitchen table. He boiled water for coffee. He sat down in the chair his father had sat in, across from the window that looked out over the south field where his father had told him about the storm. Then he lifted the lid. Inside were 3 things. A sealed envelope in his father's handwriting, labeled for Raymond, "Only when they come." A bound stack of 46 yellow property tax receipts, one for each year from 1979 through 2024, held together with a rubber band his father had doubled over 3 times. And a leather folio, cracked at the spine, containing the original 1948 Wheatley land deed, a 1979 foreclosure notice clipped from the Columbia Herald, a typewritten legal opinion letter dated November 4, 1979, and a hand-drawn map on a single sheet of graph paper. Raymond did not open the envelope that first night. He opened the legal opinion letter. It was signed by a man named Harold Pickens, Esquire, a JAG officer Clyde Wheatley had served with in Korea, who had returned to Columbia, Tennessee after the war and opened a small practice on the town square. Harold had died in 1996. His son Walter Pickens had taken over the practice and was still working out of the same second-floor office above the hardware store on West 7th. Raymond picked up the phone at 8:47 the next morning. "Walt," he said, "it's Raymond Wheatley." "Morning, Ray. You remember what your daddy told you about my daddy's land?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I do. They came yesterday." Another pause. "Bring the box." Raymond hung up. Then he sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at the sealed envelope in his father's handwriting. He remembered his father coming home from town on a cold afternoon in October of 1979, setting a bag of groceries on the counter and saying to Raymond's mother, "They think they took it. They didn't." Raymond had been 28 years old. He had not understood. His father had not explained, not that day, not for 3 more years. It was only in September of 1982, on the porch under a gathering storm, that Clyde Wheatley had told his son what he had done. "Boy," Clyde had said, "the bank made a mistake. I saw it the day of the sale. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell their lawyer. I didn't tell the auctioneer. I didn't tell anyone." Clyde had lit a cigarette. Because if a man makes a mistake that costs you your life's work, you don't correct him. You let him walk off the cliff in his own time, and then you keep the paper, and you pay the taxes, and you wait. Raymond had waited. His father had been dead for 22 years. But he had somehow still managed to set a trap. Walter Pickens was 71 years old and had been practicing law in Maury County for 44 years. His office smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco, though he had quit smoking in 1998. His desk was a walnut slab his father had bought at an estate sale in 1953. He had known Raymond Wheatley since they were both boys. When Raymond walked in that Wednesday morning carrying the green steel box, Walter said nothing for a long moment. He just looked at it. "My father talked about this box for 30 years, Walter said. He never told me what was in it." "That makes two of us," Raymond said. They opened it together. Walter read Harold Pickens' 1979 legal opinion letter first. He read it once, then he read it again. The second time, his hand went still. "Oh my God." He did not say it loud. He said it like a man closing a door. He set the letter down. He picked up the 1979 foreclosure notice, clipped from the Columbia Herald of September 11, 1979. He read the auction date. He read the legal description of the property. He read the notice requirements under the Tennessee statute in effect that year. He sat back in his chair. "Raymond," he said, "do you know what your father figured out?" "No." Walter slid the clipping across the desk and pointed to two places with a pencil. The Tennessee statute in 1979 required 20 days of published notice before a foreclosure sale of agricultural land. Look at the dates. Raymond looked. First publication, September 11, 1979. Sale date, September 27, 1979. "That's 16 days, Walter said, not 20. He pointed to the second mark. "And the legal description. The notice lists the parcel as Tract 11, District 3. Your family's land, all 167 acres of it, has been recorded in the Maury County Register of Deeds continuously since 1889 as Tract 11, District 4. He looked up. "They foreclosed on a parcel that doesn't exist, Raymond, on a day they weren't legally permitted to hold the sale." Raymond did not speak. Walter picked up the stack of tax receipts. He counted them slowly, 46 exact. He set them down. "Raymond," he said, "your father paid the property taxes on this land in his own name continuously, openly, from 1979 until the year he died. You have paid them for the 22 years since. 46 years of open, notorious, continuous possession. Under Tennessee Code Annotated, Section 28-101, adverse possession with color of title and payment of taxes requires 7 years. He almost smiled, not quite. "You have 46. Raymond looked out the window. "What does it mean, Walt?" "It means, legally, this land has been yours the entire time. It means the 1979 foreclosure was void on its face. It means Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings bought a piece of paper that secured nothing from a bank that never owned what they thought they sold." He paused. "And it means, Raymond, that by filing this lawsuit against you, they have now triggered a counterclaim for slander of title." "What's that worth?" Walter took out a yellow pad and did the math. The 167 acres at current Maury County farmland prices, lost lease opportunities over the threatened period, legal fees, punitive damages for the recklessness of the filing. He circled a number. $612,000, maybe more. Raymond looked at the number for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Draft the counterclaim, Walt." The hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in May in the Maury County Chancery Court on West 7th Street in Columbia, Tennessee. The building was 118 years old. The walls were wood-paneled, dark walnut, worn smooth in the places where lawyers had leaned for generations. The presiding judge was the Honorable Margaret Caldwell. She was 66 years old, She had been on the bench for 22 years. She was known as patient, unhurried, and completely unimpressed by expensive suits. Brandon Kincaid arrived at 8:45, flanked by two associate attorneys from Wexler, Hunt and Tate. The Nashville firm Ridgeline kept on retainer. Their lead attorney, Jonathan Wexler Jr., was 39 years old, wore a $4,000 suit, and was considered one of the sharpest civil litigators under 40 in Middle Tennessee. They believed the hearing would last an hour. They believed they would be back in Nashville by lunch. Raymond Wheatley arrived at 8:52. He wore a navy suit he had bought in 2004 for his son Daniel's wedding. He carried the green steel box under his right arm. Walter Pickens walked beside him in a gray suit that had last been pressed in 2009. The courtroom was not full. Two older farmers Raymond had known since childhood sat in the back row. A reporter from the Columbia Herald sat in the third. A clerk of the court sat to the right of the judge's bench. The hearing was called to order at 9:00 sharp. Jonathan Wexler stood first. He spoke for 18 minutes. He described the 1979 foreclosure. He described the chain of title from Farmers and Merchants Bank to Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings. He cited 4 cases. He referenced the Tennessee Uniform Commercial Code. He called Raymond Wheatley's occupation of the land at one point a 45-year course of willful trespass, and asked the court for summary judgment, possession, damages for unjust enrichment, and attorney's fees. He sat down confident. Brandon Kincaid adjusted his cufflinks. Then Walter Pickens stood. He was slow getting to his feet. He steadied himself on the table. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, "I would like to present 3 documents to the court." He did not walk forward. He set them on the table and let the bailiff carry them. The first is the foreclosure notice published in the Columbia Herald, dated September 11, 1979. The second is the Tennessee statute governing foreclosure notice in effect in September of 1979. The third is the continuous record of property tax payments made on the subject parcel, Tract 11, District 4, Maury County, from 1979 through 2024. He paused. "Your Honor, the foreclosure sale held on September 27, 1979 occurred 16 days after first publication. The statute required 20. Jonathan Wexler's pen stopped moving. Further, the legal description in the published notice lists Tract 11, District 3. My client's land is and has always been recorded as Tract 11, District 4. The courtroom did not make a sound. Finally, Your Honor, the subject parcel has been occupied openly, notoriously, continuously, and exclusively by Clyde Wheatley and his son Raymond Wheatley from 1979 to the present, with all property taxes paid in their name. Under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 282101, adverse possession with color of title and tax payment requires 7 years. My client has 46. Walter sat down. The total length of his statement was 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Judge Caldwell took the foreclosure notice in her own hands. She read it slowly for 4 full minutes. She compared it to the statute. She turned the page. She compared it again. Then she looked up at Brandon Kincaid. "Mr. Kincaid." He stood. "Can you tell this court the date on which your firm, or any predecessor in interest, last paid property taxes on this parcel?" Kincaid opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Wexler. Wexler was reading the statute. "Mr. Kincaid," the judge said more quietly, "the date." "Your Honor, we would need to review." "The answer is never, isn't it, Mr. Kincaid?" Brandon Kincaid said nothing. Judge Caldwell set down the paper. "The 1979 foreclosure is void on its face. Title has never left the Wheatley family. The motion for summary judgment against Mr. Wheatley is denied. The counterclaim for slander of title is granted. Damages to be determined at a separate hearing." She set down her pen. "We are adjourned." The courtroom was silent. Raymond Wheatley did not smile. He did not look at Brandon Kincaid. He stood up, picked up the green steel box, and walked out. 11 days later, Brandon Kincaid was no longer employed by Ridgeline Agricultural Holdings. The firm issued a 2-line statement. It used the phrase mutual separation. The The Nashville Business Journal used harsher language. The Columbia Herald put the story on the front page of the local section, under a photograph of Raymond Wheatley standing beside a fence post. 3 months later, after a damages hearing, Judge Caldwell awarded Raymond Wheatley $612,400 in compensatory damages and an additional $150,000 in punitive damages for the recklessness of the filing. The total came to $762,400. Ridgeline paid within 30 days. Raymond did not buy anything. He did not take a trip, he did not replace the truck, he did not put an addition on the house. He put $600,000 of it into a trust for his grandchildren's college. The rest he divided carefully: $20,000 to the Mount Pleasant Volunteer Fire Department, $10,000 to the First Baptist Church on Highway 43, $5,000 to the cemetery association that maintained the ridge where his father and mother were buried. The rest he kept in a checking account he rarely touched. Walter Pickens' phone began to ring. A 68-year-old widow in Giles County, whose farm had been foreclosed on in 1983, called first. Then a family in Lawrence County whose grandfather's land had been lost in 1976. Then a veteran in Lincoln County, 81 years old, who had kept a folder of receipts in a coffee can for 39 years and had never been sure what they meant. Walter took the calls. He was 71 years old. He had been planning to retire. He did not retire. He hired 2 associates. In Maury County, the story traveled the way such stories travel in small towns. It was told at coffee counters and church suppers and at the feed store on Highway 43. The details changed a little each time, but the ending was always the same. The old man kept the paper. The old man kept the paper and the bank lost. At dusk on a Sunday in September, 5 months after the hearing, Raymond Wheatley drove home alone on Route 43. The sun was dropping behind the ridge. The air smelled of cut hay and coming rain. He turned into his own driveway. He parked the truck. He did not go inside. He walked instead to the old tool shed, opened the door, placed the green steel box back on the second shelf behind the mason jars, and closed the door. Then he walked to the ridge. The oak at the top of the ridge was, according to the Maury County forestry records, somewhere between 180 and 220 years old. Clyde Wheatley had been buried beneath it in 2003. Eliza, Raymond's wife, had been buried beside him in 2019. There was room for one more stone. Raymond walked up the slope slowly. His knees had begun to bother him in recent years, and he no longer climbed the ridge as quickly as he once did. He stopped twice to catch his breath. When he reached the top, he stood for a long moment without speaking. Below him, 167 acres of Wheatley land spread out in the last gold light of the day. The south field where the storm had come in 1982. The north pasture where his father had taught him to drive a tractor at the age of 11. The pond his mother had loved. The barn his grandfather had raised in 1924. All of it still his. All of it still theirs. Raymond removed his hat. He looked at the headstone. "You were right, Dad," he said quietly. "He came, just like you said he would." He paused. I opened the box. The wind moved through the oak leaves. Raymond stood for a long time. He did not cry. He did not pray aloud. He simply stood with his hat in his hands in the place where his father had taught him that the quiet men are the ones who win in the end, because the quiet men are the ones who remember. After a while, he turned and walked back down the ridge. Some men never live to see what they built. They plant trees they will never sit under. They save receipts that will not be read in their lifetime. They write letters sealed in envelopes for sons not yet old enough to open them. They wait without bitterness for a justice that may come 50 years late or never come at all. Clyde Wheatley had waited 24 years. Raymond had waited 22 more. And on a Sunday in September in a field in Maury County, Tennessee, the waiting was finally over. If stories like this still mean something to you, stories about quiet dignity, about fathers who plan for the storms their sons would face, about the patient ones who outlast the loud, subscribe to this channel. We tell these stories because they deserve to be told. Next time, a 78-year-old widow in Kentucky, a corporate land surveyor who thought he had found an easy $500,000 payday and a cedar chest that had not been opened since 1967. You won't want to miss what was inside.